Hi there, this is Helen from buttonandsnap.com. Today I want to start a new video series showing you the very basics of how to sew. This is going to be a great series if you've never touched a sewing machine before and you want to get started, or even if you have been sewing for a little bit but you feel like you don't really understand much of what you're doing. Now today, to get us started, I want to look at some sewing machine parts. Despite having their little differences, every machine has more or less the same parts, and I think that by showing you the basic parts of the machine on a couple of machines that I have here, it'll make it a lot easier for you to understand what you're reading when you go and read through the technical data for your machine. To get the details on your machine, I would definitely suggest you read your user's manual. I know, read the user's manual is one of those pieces of advice that nobody really wants to take. User's manuals are boring, but your instructions manual has the details you need for your machine. It'll really save you a lot of time and a lot of stress. If you just look through it, you don't even have to read the whole thing. What you're looking at is the first few pages. How to thread the machine, the advice on how to get started sewing, and maybe also at the back if they have a troubleshooting guide, that's a good thing to look at as well. If you can't find your user's manual, do a search online for your machine's manufacturer and make number. Most likely you'll find a PDF that you can print and keep for future reference. In fact, this reminds me of my great aunt Edna and her microwave oven user manual. I guess the moral of the story is if you don't read your user's manual, you'll totally blow up your house. Now, before we get started, I wanted to point out this machine. This is actually not a regular sewing machine. This is an overlock machine, and we're not going to deal with it today. Today we're focusing on these three machines. You always have a pin that holds your thread on the top. On older machines, it usually tends to stick straight up. On a lot of newer machines, there's a horizontal pin right at the front of the machine here. And so you slip the thread on the pin and then secure the thread with a disc. On many machines, there's a second spool pin. Normally, you don't use it. It's there for a special stitching technique where you sew two seams at once. You use a special double needle, literally two needles next to each other, and thread two spools onto the machine at once. We aren't going to do that now, but it's good to know about for the future. From the spool, we're going to go over to this little hook. Now, this hook is, of course, a guide for your thread, angling it from the spool down towards the tension disc. However, if you look at it carefully, you'll see a small spring in here. Because of this spring, it acts as a shock absorber for the thread as it comes from the spool. Your spool, of course, has its own weight, and it can get some momentum going and spin if you start sewing quickly, or it can hang back and just sort of be tugged along bit by bit. This spring helps the thread maintain even tension as it runs through the machine, even if your spool isn't playing along. If you have an old machine, instead of the hook, you might see a series of holes you're threading through for the same purpose. Check your machine for slits along these holes. They allow for easy threading. I can slip the thread through the slits and it falls into its hole. Next, your thread goes through the tension dial. Inside the tension dial are two flat metal plates that the thread passes between. These metal discs are held together with a certain amount of pressure, and the amount of pressure exerted by the metal plates on the thread determines how tense, so how tightly pulled, the thread is when you're sewing. You can adjust the tension using the dial. Higher numbers mean there is more pressure put on the metal plates and consequently more tension on the thread. Lower numbers correspond with lower tension. We'll go into more detail regarding this in the future because it's important. attention dial, we're headed up to the take-up lever. Okay, this is the point in threading where you really need to check your manual for any extra guides you need to be going through on your way to the take-up lever. Miss these, and chances are that your machine won't work right. For instance, thread might keep breaking. This is the take-up lever. It goes up and down with the movement of the needle. Thread through this from right to left. Now come several guides you have to thread through before threading the needle. You know where to look these up. Your machine's needle is interchangeable and you need to change it out regularly so that it remains sharp. The needle is held in place by a screw. To change the needle, loosen the screw but don't unscrew it completely. The needle should slip out easily. On almost all home sewing machines, you'll see that the shank of the needle, this top part, has one flat edge, which allows you to put the needle in only in one direction. This is important because the hole on your needle has to face a certain direction. For some machines, it faces front to back, and if it does, you should always thread your needle from front to back. For other machines, it faces to the side. In this case, always thread your needle from left to right. Here are my tips for threading a needle. Set down your presser foot if it helps you see better, and make sure you've got really good light. I like to cut my thread off right beforehand to give it a clean cut. I cut straight across because I want all the fibers to go through the eye of the needle at once. I wet my thumb and forefinger and press the tip of the thread flat between them. I hold the thread so that just 1/8 of an inch sticks out and then guide it to the eye of the needle. Using this sort of rolling motion with my fingers, I push it through the hole, then pull it out the other end with the other hand. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked this, you'll love our next episode. I'll be explaining how to wind and thread a bobbin and also be explaining the mechanism of how your machine sews a seam. If you have any questions or ideas for an episode, please leave them in the comments below. Your great ideas are what powers this show. If you want to get updates when we post new videos, go ahead and click the subscribe button. And if you'd like to follow us on social media, the links for these are in the description. Happy sewing!